Okay, good. So we're recording. So anyways, when I was trying to come up with an idea for this month's meeting, one of the things I've been looking at, it's like with my own job, is how can we automate more things, and especially around source control. And there's tools that I've used before that I liked a lot. And the last job I had was at a company called OCCM. And I had a guy that I worked with there who's awesome. His name was Bruce. And I worked with him at another company. I used to work with them at LPS before they were Black Knight. And one of the things he did with TFS is he had TFS set up and configured so we were using something called gated check-ins. And the thing that was really beautiful about gated check-ins is that if a developer checked in a change to the source code, and then once they checked that change into TFS would run through a build process, make sure that the code would actually build. And then it would go through and run through all the unit tests to make sure that all the unit tests were passing. It pretty much guaranteed that you weren't going to have problems where people would check in changes that would, break the build. And I used to joke with Bruce that, I had this idea that I was planning on patenting, which was for something called a build robot. And some of you guys have heard me talk about this before, but the idea of the build robot is that what happens is whenever a developer checks in a change that breaks the build, the CI/CD service sends a message to a robot that's in the same office as the developer. And this robot knows the exact location of where the developer is sitting. And then what it does is it goes over to the developer where the developer is sitting, and then takes a stick and just starts beating the developer with the stick. And I always I always kind of like that story for the patent idea. And I was funny. I met up about 5 years ago with a bunch of GitHub engineers, and I was telling them about this idea and stuff like that. And so I kind of think that maybe they were inspired to create GitHub Actions based off of my idea for a build robot. But whether that's the case or not, I just decided it'd be a good subject to talk about tonight. So let me start talking about GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions were first introduced back in 2018, I think in beta. But there really wasn't that much you could do with it when they originally released it, and I'll go into that in a little bit later. And then last year, I think in November of last year, they added instances, and so the real power behind GitHub Actions is that you can actually run code and build processes once people have done certain events in GitHub. So the common thing is, okay, I'm making a check-in to, let's say, a beta branch as an example, and you want to create a beta build and then deploy that beta build. That's an example of something you can do with GitHub Actions. So you can actually tie GitHub to essentially all these different events and what they call workflows. And there's no configuration of the spontances required, which is also kind of nice. So you don't have to go through the pain of setting up a server. But if you do want to set up your own server, that's an option they have as well. And my understanding is it runs off of Docker, which is neat because they also kind of play into a lot of the stuff that you can do with Docker. So that's one of the uses of GitHub Actions, is for people that need to do, let's say, a Docker build when somebody's checked something in. That's one of the things that's supported with GitHub Actions. So one of the obvious use cases here is continuous integration. Somebody's checking something in, maybe you need to run a linter, maybe you need to run unit tests, you need to run a build process. Continuous integration will let you do that. Then maybe you need to deploy it to, let's say, either a dev server or a production server. You can do that with GitHub Actions as well. It's also nice if you need to do bot integrations. And this is something that I like a lot, because if you're using a tool like Slack as an example, you can send a message out to a group that all your developers in to let them know that, you know, a build completed or a build failed. That can be handled with GitHub Actions. You can also use it to do stuff like building static websites, and even an example I'm showing tonight, image converting and resizing. You can also do that with GitHub Actions. So this is just some of the things you can do with GitHub Actions. So let's talk a little about CI/CD. So DevOps has become, you know, a very popular way of running a, you know, software business. And, you know, CI/CD is essential to DevOps. And, you know, some of the process of doing CI/CD is you've got to set up, you know, some type of server that'll allow you to do these continuous integrations. You've got to be able to run a build, run tests, and deploy an app. That's all considered to be part of CI/CD. And a very popular tool, I think Brian was just, or maybe it was Brady was just mentioning Jenkins. Jenkins has become a very popular tool for doing this type of stuff. And I've looked at Jenkins before, and you know, I've just kind of been scared away from it just because it always seemed like a lot to configure. And I know a number of years ago they came out with a version 2.0 of the server, and it's supposedly gotten a lot easier. But it was a lot for me to try to get my head around. So I kind of like third-party services. And so there's a ton of third-party services. And one of the ones that I've used in the past has been Travis CI. And Travis CI actually has a pretty nice integration into GitHub as an example. But you can also do that with Circle CI, CodeShip, MS App Center, especially if you're doing mobile development. It's a nice solution around you know, trying to do mobile builds and mobile deployment. So those are all third-party services that will integrate with GitHub now. So some of the key terms we're going to talk about tonight are going to be workflows, events, hosted runners, jobs, actions, and steps. And they don't have too many examples of this, but something else that's also supported is this idea of matrix, where you can do a matrix of platforms. So for instance, like they support Linux, Windows, and Mac OS out of the box. But you can also use matrix to do things. Let's say you need to test against 3 different versions of Node.js. So maybe you need to test against 10, 12, and 14. That's something that you can configure and do inside of your workflows as well. So what's the cost of using this? And so I'm always concerned about cost. The company I work for now is a small company, and we don't have a lot of money to throw around at expensive third-party services. Well, it works out up to the first 2,000 minutes per month are free. And if you have a pro account, it's actually 3,000 minutes per month. Let's see here. If you're using a team, it's 3,000 minutes per month. Enterprise is you actually get 50,000 minutes per month. And then if you go over that, if you're using the Linux as your platform, it works out to be 0.08 cents per minute. So pretty low cost. Now Mac OS is 10 times as much, big surprise there. And then Windows is 0.016 or 1.6 cents per minute. So overall, it's not that expensive. So unless you have builds that take a day, then that might become problematic. But if your builds only take a couple minutes, then that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So with workflows, what you do is you actually define a workflow with a YAML file, and they actually have already kind of like set up templates. So they actually make it pretty easy if you want to go in and do one for the first time. They have these templates that you can use, and I'll show an example of that tonight. And then what you do is you actually, in your repo, what you do is you create a .github folder, and then inside that .github folder, you create another folder called workflows, and then you just put your workflows inside of that. And GitHub will automatically recognize any properly formatted YAML file inside that workflows folder. And one of the things they do is they provide all these runners right off the bat, and that's what I'm going to be using for my examples tonight. And they support Ubuntu as for the Linux build server. They also support Windows and Mac OS, but they also support local runners. And I think that's one of those things, like if people do have a concern about the cost and they prefer to use their own build server, one of the things that's nice about this is that you can actually integrate, you can install a local runner software onto your build server. And maybe a build server that you're just running inside of your network or something you're running up in the cloud. They have instructions and stuff on how to set this stuff up. But that's nice if you are worried about, it's like paying for the cost of running all these spot instances on GitHub. There's a way around that. So next thing is actions. And actions, they have a lot of pre-built actions that you can use. And they also have a marketplace where you can go to get third-party actions. And there's also custom actions that you can create. And if you want to do that, you can either do that with a shell or JavaScript. I have an example tonight that's done in JavaScript. But I think that they actually do support other languages as well. So, but if you're comfortable doing shell or JavaScript, then it won't be a problem creating your own actions. We have somebody else joining. Okay. So then inside of a workflow, you can actually have a job or multiple jobs. And then the jobs can actually be run on different operating systems. So if you have a step that needs to occur, let's say running on Linux, and then another step that occurs on Windows, you can do that. And one of the things that's actually kind of slick about that is, for instance, like the price for spot instances for Mac OS are 10 times as high as they are for Linux. So for instance, if you're doing a mobile project, let's say like an iOS project as an example, one of the things that's nice about that is that if you have a part that's just like, let's say you're building out a Swift module as an example, well, Swift modules can actually be built on a Linux server. So what you can do is you can actually do certain parts of it, let's say on Linux, and then if you need to do the final build process, let's say on Mac OS, then you can do that on Mac OS. So it's quite nice that you have that type of flexibility in your workflow jobs. Each job can have multiple steps, and the way these things get triggered is by events. And so in the YAML, the first line typically is an on line. And then as an example here, you can do an on push. So if somebody pushes code to the repo, that can trigger event. You can also do pull requests, issues, a check run as an example. You can even do scheduled. So they actually follow the cron format. So if you're familiar with how you set up cron jobs as an example, you can actually do that as well using GitHub Actions. And there's also something called a Golem. I've never heard of that before outside of Lord of the Rings. But what a Golem is in GitHub is like, let's say somebody goes and creates a wiki entry as an example. They have this whole wiki thing that you can do for repo. They track those events as well. And also models fork. So there's actually a bunch more of these, but I didn't want to put any more of this on the slide. So these are the types of events that you can use for triggering workflows. And the way that looks is if you look at this YAML here, one of the things you can see is that I have this on trigger. And if I wanted to, I could just say on push. And then anytime that somebody push something to this repo, it'll run. But I've drilled down and say, I only want to run this anytime that somebody pushes to the master branch. And then I also have one in here for the pull request. And what's nice about that is that if you want to trigger, let's say somebody's trying to make a change and they want to integrate it back into the master branch, maybe you want to run your unit tests at that point and do that. And so you can actually have these workflows trigger off of multiple different things. So it's one of the things that I kind of like about their workflows. So then you have job steps. And so inside of a job, you can have multiple steps. And one of the things you can do is you can just come up with a name. There's this uses statement, which is basically where if you need to supply a specific action, you can tie the job step to an action. And then if you need to pass parameters into that action, you can do that using the with keyword. And then you can also assign an ID to this, which is also kind of nice. So one of the things that's also nice about GitHub Actions, if you need to pass data back and forth between different steps, you can do that by referencing the ID. And they also have a run key that you can use as well, and that's just for running shell commands. So if you need to do like an ls or cd or something like that, you can do that very easily using the shell command. So this is kind of a more complete look at what a workflow looks like. So here, anytime somebody pushes to this repo, it's going to run this jobs build. So there's a build here in the jobs, and then they've named it greeting, and they're telling it runs on an Ubuntu latest. So whatever the latest version that they have of Ubuntu, they'll run this on Ubuntu, and then it goes through and runs through these steps. So in this case, it's using its action here called hello world JavaScript action, and then it's passing in a parameter for who to greet. In this case, it's going Mona the Octocat. And then what I'll do is it will run this next step here where it takes the time, but what it's going to do is it's actually going to take the time from that previous step. So this is kind of a simple example of something you can do with GitHub Actions. Not really a CI/CD workflow, but just kind of a neat example of how it works. You also can send in set an environment variables, and you use the env keyword for doing that. And they can be referenced inside of shell or node actions. The thing remember about environment variables is you should kind of consider these to be public. So for instance, if you have a public repo and then you have an environment variable, potentially anybody could go and read that. So if you have something that needs to be secret, there's actually a better way of handling that. But this is how you can set up environment variables. So once everything's in YAML. So in secrets, one of the things that's kind of nice about this is that you can actually store secrets inside of the settings for your repo. And I think they'll go up to 64 kilobytes in size as far as the size of the values you can assign to the secret keys. But if it's too large to store in that, 64 kilobytes, another option you have is to use GPG to encrypt and decrypt values. So there's something I'm working on right now where I'm having to do stuff with Apple, and it requires a pretty large file to be decrypted. I'm actually using GPG to do that right now. And they actually have a folder you can store this in. So you can store your secrets inside of your GitHub folder under a secrets folder. And then you can just decrypt it as part of your process. So custom actions, in this case, I'm going to show one tonight that's written in Node.js. But you can also write them as shells. But the way that you set these things up is, what you can do is you can create a repo. You can also include it in your repo that you're running your workflow on. But if you want to just create an action you can use across multiple different repos, what you do is you create like a new repo, and you set up a file called action.yml at the root of the repo. And then that file is going to contain inputs and outputs. And then you can reference which file you want to execute once the actions run. And if you're using Node.js, they recommend that you actually keep the Node modules folder inside of the repo. In other words, normally with a Node project, you wouldn't, you use the gitignore file to ignore the Node modules folder. But in this case, they recommend not doing that and just including the Node modules in there. And the two modules you're going to use if you're going to be writing stuff with Node.js are going to be the Actions core and the Actions GitHub. And this is what the action.yml file looks like. So in this case, they have set up one input where you can put in basically a value for, in this case, who to greet. And then they also accept outputs. And then here they're saying they want to run this against node 12, and they're including index.js as the entry point for the action. And this is an example of what an action inside of Node.js would look like. So here they're using the core and GitHub modules, and then they're using Git input to get any of the inputs they need. And then they can set outputs using the core as well. And that's about it as far as the actions. Of course, anything you could do in Node, you could do using these GitHub Actions. So there's also a lot of included applications on the Spot instances. So for instance, like, my company, we do mobile stuff. So they include, all the Android build tools, ImageMagick, Ruby, Node.js, the Azure CLI, Docker, Clang, Chrome, TypeScript, Webpack. There's just a ton of included applications. This is only scratching the surface of stuff that comes included in their Spot instances. And so if you don't, for instance, if there's something that's not in their available tools, you can just install it if you need to. But I think you're going to find that most of the stuff that you need is actually already there. So let's do a quick demo here. And let's take a look. I have all these repos are all public up on GitHub. But what I wanted to go ahead and do first is kind of show, here's a repo that I created. And this is very, very simple. This is I'm going to blow this up a little bit so everybody can read this. Everybody see this okay? All right. So here I've created a very simple Node library or module. And what I've done in here is I have, let's see here. I haven't done anything here with the index here, but I have these modules I've created. So I've got one here for multiplying, for subtracting, and for doing sums. And then if I come over here, I have all these unit tests that I've created, right? And then I have this CI process right here. And so this is very simple. All this does is that whenever somebody pushes to the master branch or does a pull request to the master branch, it runs this on a Ubuntu instance. It comes out here, it uses this actions checkout. And what this will do is this will actually check out the code from GitHub. And then the next action I run is the setup node. So now I want to use Node.js. And then the next thing I do here is I run an install. So it'll install any modules or anything like that I need. And then I run npm test. So this is a very simple process here of, okay, I have these changes here and I want to run some tests. So let's take a quick look here at this divide method right here. So I have this divide method. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to come out here and let's create a new branch. So I'm going to say git checkout -b, and we'll call this PR4. All right, so now we're in this branch. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this up to GitHub. And I'm going to say Git Push origin head. All right. So now if I come back here and take a look at, let's take a look at this repo here. It's seeing that there's two branches. And let's go to Actions. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that branch, PR4, and I'm going to do a pull request. And so right now it's looking and it's seeing, but it doesn't see any changes here. So let's take a quick look at this and let's do another check-in. What I'm going to do is, let's see here. I'm going to come here to my tests and I'm going to include this test here. All right. And let's see what happens if I try to check this in. And let's do Git Push origin head. All right. So let's come back here. And now it sees that this PR4 has been checked in. So let's do a compare. And we can see here that it sees this module and it wants to try to merge this here into the base. So I'm going to create a pull request. So we look right here, didn't find any conflicts, but what we should see here in a second is it's just queued up a job. And if I come over here and I select details, we can see it's running a spot instance. It's running the install, running the tests. And we can see here that looks like everything passed. And if I want to, I can come back up here. And I can merge this back in and confirm the merge. So that's an example of how you can use this to do a CI/CD type process. And let's take another look here. Let's go into this workflows here. And we can see here that I have a bunch of different workflows that I have set up here. And one of the workflows here is called hello. And this occurs anytime somebody checks anything into the master branch. So let's come back here and take a look at the actions. And we can see here. So which one was this? This is running the tests. There we go. So in this case right here, it just went through and it used that action and it ran that test. Or sorry, not ran a test, but just ran the action. So here I can see it ran the echo. So one of the things I can do here, I wanted to, as I come over here to hello, and let's change this to JaxNode. And I'm just going to add that.
Shouldn't need to add every file, right?
I'm sorry?
Once you add once, right?
Well, so I'm adding to the local repo, and then I'm going to be pushing it up to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just know you keep adding, even though you're modifying existing files. So I don't think you need to add, do you?
Well, I'm doing this. I'm using VS Code and the command line here. I'm used to using the command line for everything, but
Okay.
if I wanted to, I could just do this using VS Code. But I'm weird that way. So let's try this. Git commit. Did I already do that? Let's do a git status.
Yeah, you committed.
I committed. Okay. So let's go over here. Let's do checkout master.
You haven't pushed yet.
No, I haven't, but I'm gonna do a merge first. I'm gonna do merge PR4, and now I'm gonna do a git push. And you can see here that it sees that I'm actually not up to date with my repo. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a git fetch and do a git merge. Now I can do a git push. So let's come back here and take a look at our actions. And you could see that I've got a bunch of different actions here triggered. One is that hello. So let's take a look at that real quick. And that's RA run. And there it is. It says hello Mona of the JaxNode. So there I just changed the greeting. And let's see here. I have this other job here called shared data between jobs. So before, when I was talking about how you can run multiple jobs inside of a single workflow, but you can even run those jobs on different operating systems. So if we come here and we take a look at, let's take a look at this one to see what it's doing. Dispatch. Oh, that's not it. It's artifacts. So we took a look at this real quick. What this is actually doing is it's using a shell to come here and do a calculation and assign it to this text file. And then it uploads as an artifact. And then the second job, which is running on different operating systems. This one's running on Windows. This one was running on Ubuntu latest. It comes over here and it downloads the artifact, and then it reads that out and creates this new math homework and multiplies it by 9. And then the third job, which is running on Mac OS, what this actually does is it downloads the artifact. And so if I come back to actions, and I go to share data between jobs, and I go and open this up, you can see here that there's this artifact right here. So if I come over here and I open that, it says 90. I don't know if everybody can read that or not. So it actually did that calculation and saved as artifact into the repo. And then the last thing I was going to show inside of this repo right here, let's take a look at this, is this manually triggered workflow. So if I come over here, you see right here, there's this option here to manually run this. And so if I come over here and I run this, you can see here that it's looking for a greeting. So I'm going to say person to greet. I'll say JaxNode, location, Jax. Run workflow. And it's just triggered the workflow. And it says, hello, David Fecky in Jax, which is wrong. This is because I'm looking at the old one. All right. No, this says 17 seconds ago. So hello, JaxNode. Yeah, there we go. So I just ran that, and you can see where I applied the variables. So if we were to take a look at that, here's the workflow file for that. And you can see here that one thing you can do is you can trigger these things called workflow dispatches. So for instance, if you need to kick off like a manual process, maybe you want to do like a debug release or a production release or whatever, you could specify that here in these inputs. And then what it'll do is it'll run the job. And you can see right here where you can reference those inputs where you just say github.event.inputs.name or .home. It's got everything right there available to you. So it's almost like having a little UI. If you need to put your own input or whatever for specific jobs or workflows, you can do it that way as well. So I think that's all I'm going to show in that repo. The other thing I was going to show, which something I thought was pretty neat, is I have an iPhone here, and one of the things Apple did a couple of years ago was they came up with a new file format called I think it's HEIF as an example, and it's meant to be a more efficient version of, let's say, a JPEG or a PNG as an example. So what I'm going to do is I want to take this photo I took this afternoon, and let's accept that. Let's save to the downloads folder. And let me come over here to my folder here. And it looks like I got that. So here's this file right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my documents. And let's find my node. There we go. Projects. And I should have one here called image. Yeah, here we go. So I'm just going to drop that in here. So you can see now I've got these 4 folders in here. And if I come back out, and let's go to this tab right here. Let's do status on that. And sure enough, it sees I've got this new file here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this. I'm going to say git and do commit and adding photo of mobile dog groomer. And we'll push that up. And it's pushing it up. And so if I come over here to, let's see here, go to actions, we can see that I just checked this in and it's doing this build here. And what it's actually doing here, if we take a look at the workflow itself, it's pretty simple. All I'm doing is I'm installing a tool for basically being able to convert HEIF files. And then what I've done is I've created a shell script, and that shell script, take a look at that real quick. What this shell script does is it goes through and it looks at every single file that ends with the HEIC, and then it converts it using this this command here, HIF convert, and then it stores it as a JPEG file inside this JPEGs folder. And then what this does is it goes through each one of these and does a rotation on the file, because for whatever reason, when you save it out using this format, it actually turns the photo upside down. So what this does is it rotates it back 180 degrees, so it's the correct orientation. And then what I do is I remove the original file and then rename the new file. And then once I've done that, I come back out here and look at the workflows. This last step in here is this GitHub action for uploading an artifact. So if I come back out here to my actions and go to this action right here, you can see that it saved this artifact here, and this is just a zip file. Then I can come here and let's do a preview on that. And there's our mobile dog groomer. I just added the photo for. There's a picture of the crack in the crankcase of my engine. This is a place I stayed at down in Daytona Beach for the race. As a photo I took at the 400. So kind of a neat example of just something. It's like, this is not necessarily a CI/CD type process, but let's say you need to do something where I need to convert a bunch of images. And so what this will do is this will actually take everything that you've checked into that repo and save it into a zip file. So that you can, if somebody needs like a collection of all these photos or whatever, they can use this GitHub action to do that. And then the last thing I was going to show, I have this hello action here. This is something that I thought was pretty cool. I was looking for a way that I could actually do builds using iOS applications. So what I'm going to do here, just to see if I can't trigger this, is I'm going to come over here to this README file, and let's do this. Doing a demo. And let's come here and see here, Zoom demo. Save the changes. Now if I come here to actions, it's coming here, it's doing a build. At least you see this fails tonight, because one of the things Apple did today is they released a new version of Xcode. So Xcode went from 11.7 to Xcode 12 today. And when I ran this earlier today, it was still using 11.7. So this should work fine if we're still using that older version of Xcode. But we'll see here. Okay, so it's going here, it's setting up the job. And it's doing the checkout. There we go. Now what it's doing right here is it's going through and it's getting all these different profiles and stuff and certificates that you need in order to be able to do a build. And it's checking on the Xcode version. We'll see if this is 11.7 or if it's 12. If it's 12, this may fail. Still using this. This should work. Considering the expense, you think they'd want this to run a little bit faster. But anyways, it looks like it's kicking off the build now. And while that's going, I think I'm just going to show what I'm actually doing here with that with this workflow. So you can see right here, I have this the shell script here called Decrypt secret. So one of the things I did was here in the settings, I have these secrets here. And right now I'm not really using any of these, but what outside of the passphrase. So if I come back here to, let's see here, I come back out to this, to the script here. What this is actually doing is it's taking these two GPG files that I have stored up here. One of them is my development certificate. And what I'm doing is I'm just coming through here, I'm using this GPG command to decrypt it. And then what I'm doing is I'm passing in this passphrase secret. And then I'm doing the same thing here with my mobile provisioning, because you also need to have this provisioning file in order to be able to do a build with Xcode. And then what these lines are doing right here is they're just going through and they're making sure that the provisioning profiles are installed. And then I'm using this security command here to update my keychain with that certificate, which is how you store certificates and secrets on Mac OS. And then once that's done, what that's actually doing is it's going through and it's kicking off the build here. So it looks like it's still going. Maybe that time of the day where everybody's trying to do their Mac OS builds. But if we come back out here and we take a look at the workflow.
Can't be football. I don't think it starts until another hour here.
That reminds me, I need to finish making my picks. Let's come back out here. GitHub. Workflows. So here, when I'm going here to decrypt the secret, I'm passing in the passphrase as an environment variable. And then I'm just grabbing that off of the secrets, so that you saw that earlier where I stored that inside of here. And then I'm just running this Xcode build command to get the version. And then the last part here is I'm coming out here and I'm doing a full-on iOS, iPhone OS build using this project. And let's take a quick look here and see if that ever finished. Actions. So something also to consider, since anything that goes over that 2,000 minutes or whatever, or 3,000, depending on what kind of plan you have, this is going against your time. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cancel the workflow. So if I want to later on, I can come back here and try to rerun it where there's not as much traffic.
Is that clock time? 2,000 minutes? Or?
It's like 2,000 minutes per month for the amount of time that your spot instances are running. So if it's something takes, like say 2 minutes and 3 seconds, I believe they're charging you for 3 minutes, but the first 2,000 minutes are free, right? So if you go over that, then at that point, that's when you start getting charged 8 cents a minute for Mac OS. It's only 0.8 cents a minute if you're using Linux. So, and then it's only twice as much to use Windows. So it's obviously, it's advantageous if you can do part of your build, let's say on Linux. It's better to do it on Linux because it's the lower cost option. Something else that's also an option is you can also create a spot instance and do it that way. I'm gonna try rerunning this and see what happens. Maybe it'll run a little bit faster this time. Something else that's also cool about this is that they have GitHub Actions. Apple actually created GitHub Actions that will let you go out and upload test flight builds. So if you're trying to do a build for test flight, you can set it up so that when people are integrating in, let's say their pull request as an example, it'll go through and upload a new binary into the app store for you. And so that's a huge win for, at least for my company, because it's always kind of a pain. It's like we have to, okay, who's got the distribution certificate? It's like, okay, can you do a build tonight? You know, and so what's really nice about this is now you can automate all of that using GitHub Actions. So this looks like it ran a lot faster this time. I think that's going to finish up here. So while that's going, does anybody have any questions? They completed, so got a build here. And obviously, so one of the things you can do here is if you're doing a build process and let's say it's an executable and you want to be able to download that and make sure that it's working and stuff like that, you could also upload that as an artifact and pull it down that way. So there's a ton of things here you can do using these
What's disconcerting is why did the previous build attempt, you know, why did it hang? Well, I don't know that we looked at log files or something like that, but
I'm just assuming the reason why is because I mean, it probably would have continued to run, but the thing was that you know, they're running. I'm sure what they're doing is there's a couple companies that offer essentially Mac OS server hosting, and I forget the names of those companies. I think maybe, you know, Microsoft and Amazon might be doing something similar to that, where you can, I know like Amazon, for example, like if you want to run a server using an ARM processor, you can use AWS to do that. But there are these companies, these cloud providers that provide, essentially, I think they're Mac minis running in the cloud. And then what they do is I think they're just running multiple, you know, instances on the same hardware. And so what could have been happening is there's these other builds that were happening at the same time in the same machine that were eating up all the processing power. And I don't know if you looked at a Mac Mini, but it's like, it's not like, you know, when I look at some of these servers that like Dell and HP and stuff create for, you know, for doing like cloud computing and stuff, it's like the Mac Mini is it's not meant to be a cloud, you know, server. And the funny thing is that Apple years ago used to have a server that was pretty nice, but they decided it was not part of their core business, you know, and so they dropped the support for it. But I mean, the thing is, like, I think one of the reasons why that the Mac is as popular as it is for development is that, you know, it's essentially a Unix operating system, and if you're trying to deploy to or build stuff for a Unix operating system or deploy to something that's a Linux operating system, those two operating systems are so close to each other, and a lot of the software is just ported. Like a lot of software that I use on the Mac is stuff that was taken directly from Linux. So anyways, there's some things you have to watch out for. One of the reasons why I like having like these CI/CD processes is that when you are trying to reference a file, as an example, on Windows or the Mac, it could be, you know, all uppercase or lowercase. It doesn't matter. It's just going to work. You can't do that on Linux, and I don't think you can do that most Linuxes. I'm sorry, most Unixes either. So, like, for instance, if you're referencing a file and you make the first letter of the word uppercase and everything's lowercase in the file, you know, you're going to get like a 404 if it's a web server, as an example. So that's one of the things that I think is nice about being able to use these CI/CD processes is that I know that, if I'm running these tests and something breaks or whatever, I've tested it on Linux. I know that it's going to run on a Linux server. So it's one of the reasons why I like this. And then, like I was saying before, it's like if you're doing something, let's say, like a Swift, and maybe you just want to run a linter against it, there's no reason to use Mac OS to do that. You can do that on a Linux box. So I'm not exactly sure how they're, they may be hosting their own Mac OS machines, but I'm hoping that with more companies and stuff doing this and doing more stuff in the cloud, that Apple have a better solution. But I just don't think those machines are very meaty. They don't have very good processors. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It looks like it's very flexible.
Yeah.
What's the secret? I mean, I saw you edit these YAML files and check them in and stuff like that, but how does GitHub recognize them? Do you have to put them in that special folder? Is that how? GitHub?
Yeah, that's how they recognize it. So, for instance, if we go back to this one as an example, you can see here that I just have these 4 different YAML files.
Yeah.
They each follow that specific format. If you do something that's outside of the YAML format or outside of what they're expecting to see, it's not going to work. But you go here to your actions, and they all show up right here inside of the actions.
Right.
So yeah, that's how it recognizes it. You just basically check in a workflow file into the workflows folder in the GitHub folder, and then boop, it's there, and that's all the configuring you have to do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I think we're going to try to do one more of these next month. And then the way we've generally done in the past is that we generally take November and December off just because it's so close to the Thanksgiving Day holiday, the November one, and then the obviously you get into the holidays after that. So we'll probably do one next month, and then do another one in the next one after that in January. Hopefully, I'm hoping, keep my fingers crossed, that there'll be a vaccine and that people will want to take it, and we can start doing these in person again. But I know Zoom's kind of nice because it allows people, like I know Brian tonight, he's down in Orlando. I'm in Alaska tonight. It makes it a lot easier to do these things online. So we may start doing it to where we're doing Zoom and in person at the same time as well. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that medical science will catch up with the Rona, and we'll be done with this.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing regular flu vaccines, right? So jump on that as soon as you can. It might help, right? And then we know there's some really crazy things emerging in the news about the COVID vaccine, but yeah, I hear you. So do you have something planned already for October, or?
I do not. I'm looking for volunteers. So if anybody wants to present anything, let me know, and we can get it scheduled. Last month, we had a really good one on Svelte, and so Jitesh Doshi did that one. That was really good.
Yeah, I noticed that Decrypt is supporting Svelte right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So you can do Angular, you could do React, or you can do Svelte. So it's first person. It's not like some template you GitHub download or something like that. It's what kind of project do you want to start? Yeah, and Svelte is right there. So that's pretty cool.
I'm kind of hoping that somebody will volunteer to do one on TypeScript. And one of the reasons why is because TypeScript just seems to be becoming more and more popular. and it's they've done I think have done a wonderful job of putting in new features and stuff into TypeScript, and now Deno, which is the new essentially it's a new JavaScript runtime by Ryan Dahl. That one runs TypeScript out of the box, so you don't have to have a the TSE tool or whatever to compile your code into JavaScript. It just runs it. And
I'd like to see ECMAScript. Did they come out with a 2020 and then they've got plans already for ECMAScript 2021, new language features?
I don't know what the plans are for 2021. I've looked at a bunch of the features and stuff that are part of the 2020 specification. And the funny thing is, like, there's these features and stuff that we've been using in Swift, and I think a lot of these are also in Kotlin as well. The things that are nice about some of these features, like null coalescence and things like that. This is stuff that we've had in Swift for years. And so a lot of these features that we've had available to us on the native mobile side are now becoming available on the JavaScript side. So if nobody else volunteers, I might do another presentation on Node 14, because I think next month 14 should become become the default installer for Node.js.
Yeah, the other big news is in November, .NET Framework and .NET Core converge into .NET 5. So there will be one .NET. .NET 5 will only be 1 year of support. So even though I read an article today that Microsoft is giving the production, what do they call it? The pre. So if somebody wants to go to prod right now, they can get a license for it. But they've already declared that it's really .NET 6, which is going to be long-term support, but it's not until next November. So we're going to have a year here of the converged .NET. I'm doing some client-side Blazor now. So I took my Biorhythm example and I said, I got to figure out how this runs as a WebAssembly .NET, in the browser. And so working on that and like that. But there's so many technologies, David. It's just a matter of picking one and that you're passionate about and what's about it.
Well, we all use source control, so I figured this would be a good topic for tonight. So
it's awesome. I thought there was going to be more to it, that GitHub Actions was going to be like webhooks that you erect another virtual machine and you have a process on it, and somehow GitHub signals over to the other machine of when it's time to build or something like that. But it looks like it's a hell of a lot more integrated than that. So it looks like these YAML files are actually going to spin up your target VMs or target containers and do the build and then spin down. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so you can see they have all these templates already built, ready to go. So for instance, if you want to deploy to Azure and stuff, you just go pick a template, you go in there, you put your specific profiles and settings and stuff like environment variables, secrets. You just set all that stuff up, and then
where did you find
it up here so that it just does everything automatically for you?
Where did you find those templates? So can you? I don't know.
Well, that's pretty simple. So for instance, they make that really easy. So if you just go to Actions as an example, and you go New Workflow.
I got it. Okay.
It says it lets you choose a workflow template. And so this is a Node app, so it comes up with a couple here for Node, and that's actually the original one that I did. I just pulled from one of these templates and just modified it for what I needed to do.
Yeah.
See here that they've got 10-cent Kubernetes engine. They've got AWS, Azure, IBM.
No, the ultimate would be a static website, one that's built and then deployed statically to practically a CDN, right? You can host, a lot of places are doing free hosting of static static sites?
Yeah. So something that like I use Gatsby for a lot of the sites that I do now, which is a React-based static site generator. And I've been using Netlify, and they just, you can just point to a repo, and every time you do a check-in to a specific branch, it will redeploy the website. But if you wanted to, you could just use an S3 bucket, right? And push this out to an S3 bucket or into, a volume or whatever out onto
AWS.
Azure as an example. And
Yeah.
so you can do all that, right here. The only reason why I'm using Netlify is, well, there's two reasons. One is it's free. And then the other reason is that it directly integrates with GitHub. So it's like, I don't have to do anything. I didn't have to do any CI/CD process. It's built into the product. So, so that's the next thing I have to do, is to actually go through and say, okay, now how do I get GitHub Actions to work properly with Heroku? And you can actually, they have a marketplace here where you can go to. And let's see here. Yeah. So I go to marketplace. I can come over here to Actions as an example, and I can just type in Heroku.
Yep.
And then I'll come up with all these different Heroku actions here. So if I want to do a git deploy to Heroku, there's an action right there that you can use for doing that. So, they make it pretty easy actually to get this stuff set up and going.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, especially with Blazor, right? So now all my really cool functional biorhythms can be static, and run as WebAssembly on the client.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
And I don't have to worry about that nasty JavaScript stuff. I can do that.
Well, this is a JavaScript user group.
Oh, is it? Oh, this is the wrong one. I'm sorry, guys.
It's all right. We have a bunch of members of JaxNode that hate JavaScript. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. If anybody has any ideas for upcoming meetings, please let me know. I can get you put on the schedule if you want to do a presentation. And everybody, have a good night.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
No problem.